Hey everyone, it's Safa. I decided to make this video today about creating boundaries for some people that I know who may be struggling with that. I know that I did for a very long time not know how to create healthy boundaries with people. I thought that creating boundaries was about controlling what the other person does. Unfortunately, you're not able to control what anybody else is doing. You're only able to control what you do. And creating boundaries is also simultaneously accepting that no matter how many boundaries that you create, a person may still attempt to cross your boundaries. And when that happens, you have to know how to be able to take decisive action. So when you make a boundary, step one, you're going to have to realize that the outcome may not be what is in your desired outcome, which is that the other person says, oh yeah, I think that's a respectful boundary. Sure, I'll do that. So it's not easy, basically. I want to give an example situation of what creating boundaries might be. Say you're living with somebody and the common space is, not as orderly as it should be because maybe one or more people are just leaving their stuff around. A boundary would be like an agreed upon sort of negotiation between people, like anybody who leaves their shoes in the living room by the couch or their dirty socks by the couch is going to get their shoes thrown away. I know, that's really extreme, I guess, but you know what? It's things like that where it's like a house rule, right? And there's a clear consequence. That's a boundary that people are most likely going to keep because they don't want their shoes to get thrown away. That's just an example of what a boundary looks like, because it's saying like, all right, if you do this, I'm going to feel angry and get mad. Because people don't want you to get mad. So you could truly say like, I feel angry when this happens and I'd really like it to not happen anymore. And this is how I get by traveling. Is it's funny, sometimes I don't give even an explanation when I want to set a boundary with somebody, but most of the time people respect my boundaries of what I have to say. Like, for example, I like giving examples if you haven't noticed. I was doing tarot out on the street, and a guy comes up to me. He'd been talking to me before. He's kind of like a random homeless kid. He came up to my sage bundle and tried to touch it. Like, he just reached out. Like, I totally get why he's like compulsively drawn towards the sage bundle, because like he needs clearing, you know what I mean? Like energetic clearing. But at the same time, he doesn't know how to respect other people, which is part of why he needs clearing, is he doesn't respect himself either. But when he reached for it, I was observing what he was doing, and I just said, "Hey, no." That's all I said. It was like, "No." And he totally understood exactly what I was talking about, because half of it's body language, you know what I mean? Standing in your power when you state your boundaries, really important, because the person knows that you mean business. It's not kind of like, oh, well, I kind of thought that maybe you could do a dish around here. Yeah, that'd be great. Or like not addressing the person, like either a person you're living with or whatever, directly. Uh, you know, having the issue of not being able to be direct. Like, you're trying to set boundaries in a sort of like indirect way, which, going back to my original example of like people who leave their shoes in the common room, get their shoes thrown away. That's kind of an example of like an indirect boundary where the person doesn't get called out, you know what I mean? But it's still, you can still directly address some behavior that you don't like with a person without necessarily calling them out and making them the bad guy. this is the thing about boundaries is that it's your personal preference, and you shouldn't be making your boundaries about like this ultimate idea of right and wrong. Like everything that you feel is a good boundary is like the ultimate good in boundaries for everyone else, and that people should automatically be able to read your mind about what's good and bad. Because this situation happens a lot where person A thinks that their ideals are sort of like a set of ideals that everyone else should live by. So when somebody crosses one of their boundaries that they assume that everyone else already knows or should know, they get very angry. This is kind of an egotistical, narcissistic perspective. When a person thinks that the way that I do things is the way that everybody else should do things. So knowing that is really important to communicate exactly how you feel. And it's about how you feel, not about the ultimate right and wrong, good and bad. So like, you can tell a person, hey, I feel bad that this happened, and you were the author of the act, and my reaction to that was this feeling of discomfort or sadness, or not feeling heard, not feeling seen. And when the person hears you talk about your feelings, hopefully they'll be able to relate, because everybody at some point in their life has felt not heard, not seen, not respected, or uncomfortable. And like a lot of the times, if somebody does something that makes you feel that way, they will be, either oblivious to it. Oh my God, I totally didn't mean to make you feel that way. I didn't mean to offend or whatever. They're just doing what's in their comfort zone. The boundaries or lack of boundaries that they were putting up with, as a kid or as a young adult with their peer group, which I think will inevitably reflect your upbringing in some way by either being very similar or like the polar opposite of your upbringing. And, a lot of people end up repeating patterns of the past. I did a video just yesterday about karmic cycles, and what can happen a lot is you'll keep getting the same karmic cycle in terms of like your boundaries. So the same boundary being broken over and over again until you learn how to stand in your power and say, no, I don't like that. That makes me feel bad. Of course, taking into account that, the actions of other people are out of your control. That boundaries are not about control. It's about you being in touch with your likes and dislikes and saying, this is what I'm going to do if you don't respect my boundary. So like a consequence of somebody like maybe not leaving you alone or being too close to you, too close to your body, would be like you would legitimately, have to, run away from that person, or in the worst case scenario, to physically fight them off. That would be an expression of boundaries. And I'm not saying you should go around fighting people. I would always walk away. That's what I've always done in the past, is I've never been in a fight. I'm really interested in stuff in martial arts and being able to create boundaries in lots of ways, because, in the past, people have, violated what boundaries I felt were pretty much like, obviously you shouldn't do that. But what I'm saying right now is that I have cultivated a sense of situational awareness, to where I know I can see a situation from a mile away where the type of person who does that, I can sense that. And I'm not saying that means that, I'll just have only good things happen to me for the rest of my life. But I also believe in the law of attraction, and it's a complicated topic, so I won't get into that in terms of like what that means for your boundaries, but I will get into the karmic cycle bit. So if it's happening over and over again in your life where a certain thing is happening and a certain person is doing something that you don't like, and you haven't learned how to set boundaries by saying, if you do this, I'm going to leave. Or, like, if you do this, I am going to have to react in some way, and be able to have that person anticipate your reaction instead of saying, wow, you shouldn't have done that because now I'm reacting. You know, it's kind of like giving somebody a heads up. It's like, it's also in some cases giving somebody a chance. But what you ultimately need to do is, if there's a person in your life who's not good at respecting anybody's boundaries, you should get the hell away from that person, because you're not going to change them. That's a boundary, is creating space in between you and the person who's violating as much as possible in whatever possible way that you need to do that. So yeah, that's like a pretty difficult thing for a lot of people to do. And there's definitely more to it than I can really recount in a short video. But, you know, I only do short videos. So this is the most basic conceptual material, I guess, for creating your boundaries, is having the knowledge that you're in control of you and expressing how you truly feel. Using I feel statements to not put the other person on the defensive. Really important, because that's expressing your own personal perspective and not a sort of like universal right and wrong. Anyways, drop a comment to let me know how these techniques can work for you. You know, there's definite other techniques in dealing with conflict that are going to be useful to you as well. So I would go ahead and like look those up. Watch my video about karmic cycles. And, you know, like and subscribe, obviously, to this channel. I thank you very much, guys, and I'll say ciao for now.